Today we're going to be talking about kind of the youth crisis in America, which I see as progressively getting worse and worse. Anyone I think who spent some time on social media or pays even a slight pays attention even a little bit to the news has probably heard of Greta Thunberg. Now, I don't really want to get into the whole climate change thing debate in this podcast. Um, but Greta Thunberg is a 16-year-old Swedish girl who's been all over the news lately because she's been giving speeches in front of Congress, if I remember correctly, the Senate, the United Nations. Basically, she's this 16-year-old girl who was, I think she was basically the face of or the leader of this school walkout that happened. That's happened, I think, worldwide. I haven't read too much into it, but it's all these students walking out of schools in protest to the fact that organizations like or groups like the United Nations and different governmental governments have done nothing about climate change. These are children that are convinced because they've been told so by their teachers and by their parents that if something isn't done right this moment about climate change, then we're all going to die. Like this is something that is going to cause the extinction of our species. Um, I don't believe that, but that's content for another podcast. I don't think the science is there. I just don't. There's a lot of reasons why I don't believe that. But, and this is a big but, I don't have a problem with Greta Thunberg. There's been a lot of conservatives that have kind of said things about her I don't think they should have said. Michael Knowles just got blasted on Fox News for basically saying that he said she was mentally ill. I mean, she has Asperger's, she suffered from depression and anxiety and some other social issues. So technically, she has mental health issues, yes. Um, I don't think he was trying to insult her, but anyway, he got in trouble for saying that, and some leftist progressive screamed at him on air. But anyway, Greta Thunberg, she reminds me a lot of David Hogg. David Hogg came out of the Parkland shooting, and he was like the face of school shooting survivors here in the country, in America here for several months. And there was a couple other, I think a girl with the last name of Ramirez who was really big there for a while. David Hogg has a huge, tremendous following on Twitter now. People follow his every word, that this kid said. And he was all over CNN, MSNBC. It didn't matter. He was being interviewed by everybody. And people, adults across the country in our government and elsewhere, were hanging on this kid's every word. He was the face of anti-gun legislation. Obviously, he didn't put forth any legislation himself, but this kid really was the face of what they would call common sense gun control legislation, which anytime somebody uses the word common sense, to me, it means that they don't have an argument, that they haven't thought it through. That's just not an intelligent philosophical way of summing up your argument. Well, it's just common sense. No, it's not. You're going to have to explain it to me so I can see whether it actually is. Um, but what I see as the tragedy here is really the lies that these kids are being told. The Greta Thunbergs, the David Hoggs. I don't blame them for reacting in an alarmist fashion. Greta Thunberg's being told by people she looks up to, people that are there to mold and shape and responsibly build up her view of the world, of culture, of life, of human responsibility, and what the world is like. These are her teachers, her parents. It should be the church, but the church in Europe is gone. She's Swedish, so I don't think much of the church in Sweden. But these are all people that are there to protect her and mold her up and give her hope for the future. And I think they've failed her utterly, instead giving her this bleak, nihilistic lie. And as a matter of fact, I wasn't going to mention this because I don't have the article in front of me, but there was a group of students that testified, I think, before a governmental body. And again, because I don't have the article, I hesitate to mention it. because I can't verify it, but I saw this it was on the news here. It was last week where these students were testifying that what they're being taught in the schools with climate alarmism has really changed and warped their view of the world to where they're very nihilistic now. They testified that hope seemed to have been sucked out of life. That a lot of students today are just having this attitude of what's the point, if we're all going to die in 10, 12 years, as Ocasio-Cortez is so spouts off so constantly, then what really is the point of bettering yourself? What is the point of going to college and getting an education? To me, that's one of the main reasons why I think that these Democrat candidates are lying about this climate alarmism, why it's a hoax, is because you go and see Barack Obama just bought a, what was it, 15 million, I think, dollar beach house, I think in the Hamptons or something like that, in an area that is projected by climate alarmists to be underwater in just a few years. Now, but yet he buys into it wholesale. So at least when he's on stage and in front of the cameras. So it kind of makes you wonder how much they really believe this nonsense they're peddling. But I want to move past that. Uh, Basically, I'm just trying to point out that what the kids are being told these days is really destroying their view of the world. The same goes for David Hogg with the Parkland shooting, and the Parkland shooting. Um, we keep asking ourselves why do school shootings keep happening? But the real fear for me is, why are kids killing other kids? And I know some people talk about this, but that's the thing that I think really needs to be like zoned in on and honed in on and really debated and really thought about. And we really need to come to some sort of answer on this. I mean, I think I know the reason. It's just a question of whether the country at large would see it that way. I doubt it very much. But the real tragedy here, and what really scares me about it, is that these are children killing other children, and they don't seem to be hesitating about doing it. And I do, when you hear these students testifying, and again, I don't have the article, but testifying that this climate alarmism that's being shoved down their throats daily in their school system is really making them nihilistic and hopeless. That doesn't bode well for future school shootings, in my opinion. It makes me think that there will be more of them. They're already hopeless as it is, and for a variety of reasons that I've gone into in other podcasts. I think the removal of human worth and value, when you remove like the creation narrative and instead replace it with evolution, which just tells you you're another animal. It removes your self-worth. The nihilistic view of atheism, where you're just meat for the world, and so no matter what you do in this life, it's irrelevant. It has no bearing, no meaning, no ultimate value. Your life is just like the squirrel's life that got run over by a truck 5 minutes ago. Um, so is it any wonder that we have so many school shootings? But what's really frightening is something that is not being talked about at all. If you turn on the news, you will not hear about this topic, and it's the topic that I've raised before in previous episodes. It's pornography. If there's one thing that's rampant in the culture today, it's pornography. You can't get away from it. I have a Juno email account, and if I go in to check my email, along the right-hand side of the screen will be a number of scantily clad lingerie models, barely, as I said, scantily clad, up and down, flashing on the side of the screen. You drive down the road in the summer and there's 15, 16-year-old girls in shorts that come all the way up their rear ends, because they've been told and taught by this culture, by by social media and by the advertising. by advertising campaigns which dominate social thought, that sexuality and expressing yourself sexually will raise your self-esteem, will increase the way people look at you in a positive way. All of these things not true at all. In fact, the contrary is true. But this is what they're being told. And the pornography, in and of itself, has become what used to be considered pornography, say in the 1920s and the 1930s, is now the norm. So as I said, those scantily clad lingerie models on the side of my screen when I check my email in Juno, that was pornography in the 1930s. In the 1930s, they used to have these little binocular like movie screens that they would put a quarter into, and then they would turn the handle, and it would be a woman slowly undressing down to her panties, basically. Except the panties they wore back then were not the panties they wear today, where it's like a thong or lingerie, like an outfit you would wear before or when you're going to have an intimate night with your wife. Instead, it was like what they would call grandma panties. Like, not today, we would be like, what is that? You know. So it really has changed over time. There's an article I'm going to read in a second that really kind of highlights this. But even the pornography that was popular in the 60s, 70s, 80s is nothing compared to what is out there today. I mean, yes, the women were naked and everything. But the type of pornography is what has degenerated so much, and is very fitting with what it actually is, which is an addiction. And addiction is a progressive thing, which is why when young kids start out viewing pornography, it starts out as like taking their father's Playboy magazines and running off to the shed with them, or viewing like Baywatch, or whatever, a Victoria's Secret catalog, in the dark in a closet. That's how it starts out always. But like any addiction, something that is sin or addictive, it is progressive by nature. And so it takes something darker and more intense to satisfy and get the same release, as it were. Scientists have proven that masturbation through porn, by viewing porn, has the same release to it, the same dopamine release in your brain that cocaine does. So this is something that is extremely highly addictive. And as an addiction is incredibly progressive in nature. And children that are, because of how easy it is to view on the internet, children younger and younger are starting to see pornography. And again, it's not the pornography of the on the internet. It's not the pornography of like the 60s and 70s, like your father's Playboy magazines that he keeps in the basement. That's tame by today's standards. What children are finding now is actually the hardcore stuff, because you can access it just by typing in a few keywords on Google. And these sites do not vet who comes into the site, and who views the content. It used to be that some sites would require you to put in a credit card number to prove somehow that you were 18 years of age before you could go into the site. Nothing like that happens now because of piracy. So there are many sites now that just completely steal and pirate pornographic videos and put them up on their site, and there's no sort of vetting or proof of how old you are before. Not that you should, anybody of any age should be viewing this stuff, but to keep children from viewing it, they don't even make an attempt. There is no attempt. And so children can go on to Google, can go onto any of these sites and just type in a few keywords and very quickly be viewing some of the most disturbing material that is out there. And the way pornography has progressed, it's no longer just a girl, dancing seductively to slow music or whatever. She takes her clothes off. Now a lot of the pornography today is so graphic and violent that it's a literal recreation of a rape scene. I'm not the only one to talk about this. I mean, there's people that are, if you read the articles online, it doesn't get talked about on the news, but there are people that are incredibly worried about this, the effects is having not only on children, but particularly on children, but also on adults. What sort of link does this have between adults and rape? When you're viewing that kind of stuff on a continual basis, there's no way you can tell me, and there's no way you can prove that does not completely debase your view of women, your respect for women. Women become a sex object, and the women in these videos are a typical video would be somebody coming to the front door, attacking the woman saying no at first, but then as the man continues, she gets turned on and then just flings herself into a very violent, intense sexual experience that is just absolutely degrading. The men spit on the women, they curse at them, they call them the most foul names, and the woman. And the really damning thing about it is the woman's response. The woman is turned on by it. So this isn't something that the woman calls the police about. Rather, the woman exhibits arousal to being raped, being called all sorts of derogatory names, and being spit on, kicked, slapped, whatever. And children who have no knowledge of sex really are viewing this stuff, because there's no way to stop them. These sites pirate the videos, put them on there, just like YouTube will pirate a video. There's pornographic YouTube sites that are out there, and anyone can view it. And so these kids are watching these rape scenes and then going to school. Now, this article that I ran across, basically, this woman did some research, and she works at a clinic or at a hospital, and most of the cases of these young girls being raped, in most cases, or in a large proportion of them, the girls are being raped by other children. So it is children raping other children. And in almost all of the cases, these children, they don't just, wake up one day and go and do something like this. It's a learned experience. So it's either abuse in the home that they've witnessed, say an abusive parent or family member who's abusing them, and so they've, in a very warped, perverted way, internalized this and either act out in anger and pain, or because they think it's normal, or they're exposed to pornography that has normalized this type of behavior. And this is overwhelmingly the case in many of these, in so many of these situations now. Children raping other children because of what they've seen in pornographic videos. And you don't hear this being talked about. And it's because I have another child on the way, and I have a 4-year-old. These kinds of things are really starting to freak me out. The way we really are screwing our kids up completely, and nobody seems to be talking about it. There really doesn't seem to be any awareness that the people, the true victims in society of all this crap that is out there, are the kids. When adults watch these violent videos and then go and pursue this kind of violent behavior that they've seen in pornographic movies, there's their kid witnessing this, and you've just warped their perspective of sexuality forever. And so that child is now a victim because of selfish perversion of an adult. The same goes for the pornographic videos. I mean, these things are not, there's not even an attempt to keep them out of the hands of children. And somehow in our warped society, we view this as art or something else. It's beyond me how this stuff is even defensible. To choreograph a rape scene, I mean, how do you defend that? And then furthermore, to make no real effort effort to say that this is fantasy or anything like that, but to film it as a realistic scene and then make no effort to keep it out of the children's hands. I'm going to read from this article because this was really eye-opening for me. So this is from protectingyoungminds.org. The article is called Sexual Assault Expert Warns of Heartbreaking Trend Among Children. And I'm going to skip down a little bit to where, and this is Heidi Olson. And she says, I remember distinctly where I was sitting several years ago when my gut told me something was off. I have learned from more experienced nurses that trusting your gut often gives insight into unspoken but vital pieces of a situation. I was talking to the parents of a 5-year-old girl who had been sexually assaulted by her 12-year-old brother. The father of the children stumbled upon the assault, so there were no questions as to what kind of violation took place. As the tearful parents grieved and asked, why would our son do this? My mind pondered those same questions. Here is the reality. Children learn these types of sexually aggressive behaviors. Children don't instinctively act out sexual violence on each other. They don't instinctively want to violate or push sexual boundaries with their siblings or younger children. These things are learned. Of course, some children who act out in sexually harmful ways have been victimized themselves, but my intuition told me that there is an unspoken factor fueling many assaults. Many sexual assaults occur because of what young perpetrators have been exposed to via screens. Children watch violent sexual acts with no previous direction or insight into what is normal, healthy sexual behavior, and then perform these sexual acts on other children. Right. And a lot of this, what she's talking about here, it comes directly from the total dissolving and breakdown of the family structure. We act like these things are just, tiny unconnected problems, like, oh, over there the family's falling apart. Oh, over there the church is disintegrating. Oh, over there we've kicked God out of the public schools. But pornography and rape, that's a separate issue. No, these things are incredibly connected. They all hinge off of each other. And if one thing disintegrates, then the next thing does. It's like a house of cards. They are all dependent on each other. There's a reason why they say the family is the cornerstone of society. So if the family disintegrates, there goes the rest of society. So when she's saying these children have no previous direction or insight into what is normal, healthy sexual behavior, and then perform these sexual acts on other children, in a healthy home, the parents, the father and the mother, would have at least had a discussion of what if you see this, run away from it and talk to us, or this is normal and this isn't. Instead, with no father figure or a mother that's gone all the time, the children have no figure like that. It's left to the public school system, basically to take its place, the almighty government. And we know how that goes. The public school system right now is engaged in encouraging children to play around with their sexuality, to play around with gender roles. And then we wonder why they rape each other, why they shoot each other in schools. The public school system is responsible for telling them that there is no God and that they are just animals like anything else in the street, just meat for the world. And then we wonder why they beat each other up, why one child doesn't respect another. Why is bullying so bad if there is no God and we have no value? Furthermore, it goes on, as my mind raced over these thoughts, the mother of the two children blurted out, well, we have found a lot of porn on our son's phone lately. Do you think that has anything to do with this? And I knew, the woman says, Heidi says, in that moment that these two things were completely intertwined. Let me see here. I'm going to skip down. I thought the typical perpetrator was most likely going to be a creepy old man in his 60s who lured kids into his basement with lollipops, but I was so wrong. The biggest age range of perpetrators that I see in my hospital are children. In fact, for the third year in a row, our biggest age range of people committing sexual assaults are children ages 11 to 15. The biggest age range for perpetrators of sexual assaults on children are children 11 to 15. If that doesn't scare the crap out of you, I don't know what would. If that doesn't make you angry at society for completely failing our children, I don't know what does. And if that doesn't make you angry and disgusted with the church in America for failing society at large, I don't know what does. This is a damning indictment of just everything about our country, that we could get to this point, but yet nobody talks about it. Pornography is just, that thing that we all laugh about when we watch American Pie, is the kids sneak into their room and, oh no, dad just walked in. Oh, son, well, here, I'll give you a few magazines from back in my day. We treat these things as casual, silly stuff, and yet here are the consequences. And nobody's laughing in these families' homes, I'll tell you that right now. So she says, let that sink in for a minute. These kids aren't even old enough to drive, yet they are committing the most sexual assaults in our region. To put this in an even better perspective, my hospital sees one of the highest volumes of sexual assault victims in the United States. So our numbers are large, meaning these young perpetrators are not an anomaly. I was alarmed by the number of 11, 12, and 13-year-old perpetrators I was seeing. So I started looking through our past sexual assault victim stories and found hundreds and hundreds of records of sexual assault survivors who were perpetrated on by another child. Pornography is often a main factor, and sometimes the only factor that influenced a child to act out in a sexually harmful way. As I studied our data and have seen more and more patients, I realized that it's imperative that we understand the way that pornography is creating devastating effects for children across our country. The children that I see are not in a vacuum. Stories of child-on-child sexual abuse are ringing out all over the world. The trend is growing rapidly. With pornography being so widespread and easily accessible, remember, nobody vets. There is no way that they can tell whether you're 18 or not going onto a site. Not that an 18-year-old would be better off watching rape than a 12-year-old, but still, they don't. There's free access. You can type in anything you want into Google or any of these search engines and watch anything you want, literally. With pornography being so widespread and easily accessible, more and more children are viewing and subsequently acting out what they see on vulnerable children. And is it any wonder? Of course they're going to act it out on their peers. Of course. This is to them normal, so they're going to act it out on those they're around on a daily basis. Other children. The solutions are not quick or easy. There's shame involved with families who have a child sexually act out on another child. Most families do not want to admit that this tragedy has occurred. Um, she talks about therapy groups. To compound the issue, we live in a culture that continuously normalizes pornography, which is what I was talking about. I mean, you can't even go onto your Juno email page without seeing women with pasties on. That continuously normalizes pornography and refuses to acknowledge the ugly truth that it fuels sexual assault and rape culture. And then there's the pornography normalizes violence. I have seen things that I cannot write about, violence that is hard to fathom, let alone explain, moments that have left me nauseated and in tears. Things are inflicted upon beautiful, innocent children at the hands of other children. Brutal assaults are carried out by the hands of teenage boys who believe that sexual violence is normal. They're not doing something that they think is disgusting or bad or perverse and taking a sickening satanic delight in it. Rather, they're doing something that they see as normal, average, run-of-the-mill, everyday behavior because nothing about it, when you view it on the internet, makes you feel like it's not normal. Everything about the videos, the way they're set up, are there to entice and lure you in and give you the impression that everybody in there is having a grand old time. The women in there give the impression that women enjoy being raped and spit on and mocked and laughed, and that the word no, and this is the worst part about it, they're being taught in these videos that the word no does not mean no. In fact, most of the time it means yes. I see kids who think that anal and oral sex are normal before you've even gone through puberty, and that's insane. I come face to face with stories about kids who do not listen when a victim repeatedly tells them no. Why? Because they've seen the violence, the strangulation, the slapping, the name calling of women 1,000 times in pornography, and they think that it is normal. Then they act it out, leaving behind a wake of destruction for themselves and their victims. If there's one thing that we can be assured of, it's that if we don't turn things around in the country, if we don't start in the family, in the homes, with fathers actually staying in the home and raising their children up and being a godly example, that's where it starts. That's if you want to stop this problem. It's that people like me who are parents stay in the home and be aware that, you know what, you may struggle with pornography. You may struggle with wanting to watch pornography. But even if deep down you can't find it in yourself to not want to do it. In other words, you think, well, I don't think it's all that bad. At least think of the example that you have to provide for your child. That you don't want your child looking up to you and thinking those things are normal or right. It's a disgusting, perverse parent that could actually view that kind of stuff with their children. So the next time you want to sit there and watch something like that, think, would you sit there and watch that with your 5-year-old? If the answer is yes, you belong in prison. If the answer is no, don't ever view pornography again. Um, yeah, I'm going to try to think of it like that. Um, but yeah, I don't understand why this isn't being talked about more. If only maybe the main reason is because of money, like all other things in this country. The pornography industry is a billion-dollar industry. It's becoming one of the biggest money makers in the country right now. You don't take my word for it. You can look this stuff up for yourself. I mean, the porn industry is just, I mean, it's a worldwide industry. It's making more money than anything else. And why not? Why shouldn't it? When we have unrestrained, we've told ourselves as a culture just to not to that restraint, that moral restraint is actually evil. That we're telling ourselves what is good is evil and what is evil is good, and that moral restraint is a form of bigotry or oppression, and that acting out any desire that comes into your diseased brain is the norm and is actually a boon for society. That we are damning our children. This is you can't have children go through things like this without irreversibly destroying their lives. A child can't rape another child and then just, oh well, let's go watch Mary Poppins and then go. No, they're done. They're screwed. It's over. It's done. There's therapy for the rest of their life. If there's a miracle, maybe, but if not, that child is traumatized for the rest of his or her life. And also, I feel for the perpetrators, because a lot of these kids don't know what they're doing is wrong, so they're screwed for the rest of their life too. Imagine the guilt and the shame of that. You thought it was normal, and come to find out as you get older the horror of what you did. All because some videos made by adults who should know better made these things, these horrific acts, seem normal to you. Smiling at sin. I can't help but think that, the judgment that must be waiting, just looming in the sky above our country right now, because of things like this. Jesus talks about this, how it's better for somebody to tie a millstone around their neck and throw themselves into the sea than to bring this kind of destruction on young children, to cause young children to sin, or to stumble, as he says, basically to sin. What else is that than to normalize pornography and to cause and warp a child's mind so much that he would think it's normal to rape another child? I mean, imagine the kind of judgment that is waiting for us on the other end of eternity when we normalize something like that. We need to really pray for the country and for ourselves and for our families, and that the church will regain its place where it needs to be in the center of community, so it can condemn this kind of stuff, and be a place that families can run to for safety and solace and recovery and hope, when these things do happen. But it's not there right now. It's lost its place. And that's a great tragedy, because where are these kids going to run, to a therapist who really, I don't believe, has any real answers for them. So that's the episode for this week. Something to pray and think about, and I can only pray and hope that more people become aware of how this is not a trivial issue. We tend to wink at pornography and think like it's just this thing that, like, everybody's got a few dirty pictures on their computer. Did you wipe your hard drive clean? All these jokes that we tell, it's not funny. This stuff actually destroys lives, and it's ruining and destroying our children, my children, and your children. So we got to do better. All right, well, that's it for this week. In the meantime, good night and God be with you.